I think we can begin now. So thank you for being here. Thank you for making it. Yesterday, we just a short, small recap on what we had yesterday. We talked about the relevance of tests, talked about the types of software testing, the methods, the levels, and testing environment setup. Yes. Daniel, Fedra, and IG are Oghomwen are the ones who are leading this. Our talent managers are the ones who are leading this. So I think I'll hand over to them to get into it. Daniel, please. Also, if you have any questions, feel free to send them in at any point. Yes, Daniel, over to you.
Thank you, Paul and IG. Welcome back, everyone, for the software testing
Daniel,
bootcamp.
I don't know if you're speaking. Oh, sorry.
Yes, thank you, Paul, for the clarification. Hello, everyone. Once again, we would like to welcome you back for the software testing session. Hope yesterday's session was very fruitful. We're looking at basically the overview or the theory of software testing, with focus more on what developers actually are handling. Today, we're going to be looking at a test demonstration, really. So basically, the practical bit of software testing that we looked at yesterday, the unit tests, integration tests, and the other different kinds of tests. However, we are not going to be looking at the non-functional tests, which are more specific to software testers, really, and other different roles. So as we mentioned yesterday, we are going to be looking at the functional tests that are done by the developers. Yes, yesterday we finished off by looking at some of the prerequisites, things that we should already have installed, or some brief knowledge that we should have already. And I was able to let you know that today we're going to be using Python, specifically the Django framework, and we're going to be testing the user modules of Django. That should be easy or straightforward because they already come with the framework. So you don't need previous knowledge of Django or Python. You can just be able to follow through in this session. Yes, just as a recap on what we looked at yesterday, we had a look at testing in general, where we summarized testing to be looking for bugs or to make sure that our system functions as it should. In summary, have we built the right product, or are we building the product right? So we're looking for both of these while we're doing software testing. So that is basically the purpose of software testing. We're also able to look at the different types of testing, the different categories of testing. We looked at manual testing, automation testing, and we also looked at black box testing, white box testing, and gray box testing. Then we finished off with non-functional and functional testing. I hope we can all recall this. Someone cannot see my screen. I hope all of you can see my screen. And if you missed yesterday's session, then you could just make sure that you remind us, and then we'll be able to share it with you via email. And later on, the YouTube videos will be available for follow-up once the sessions are complete. They will also be shared with you on the Tunga YouTube channel. So please stay tuned. For those that are joining in today, we looked at software testing yesterday, and today we're going to be looking at the practical bit of things in a short while to come. So my first question then goes to the people that were there yesterday. Did anyone install any of the things we talked about that we're going to be using today? Yes, I see Adebowale installed, Prince also installed, Joseph did not install all. I'm curious to know which ones you didn't, because if some of these components are not installed, then we're going to be facing certain challenges somewhere. So if you don't have package managers, then you could face package issues or dependency issues. If you do not have Python installed, then definitely maybe you could have, you may find challenges there. If you don't have Django installed, you could face issues there as well. So we need basically all of these things. I do not know which operating systems all of you are running, but we're going to be, I'm going to be using the Mac OS today. So which is also similar to the Linux. So that will be interrelated. If you're using Windows, that's not a problem. The commands are basically what change, and these commands are readily available to you anyway. So the focus should be on mainly on how the testing is done and what needs to be done, or what steps are taken when testing. That should be our focus. So yes, I see a lot of people installed Git and Python. I'll also be pushing the tests to GitHub because we can run these tests locally, or we can run these tests in production. So there's two things: a test that in Sandbox, or a staging environment, or a testing environment, you could run tests and they pass. However, when you run tests in production, that for the same project, it could fail. So we run tests basically both in locally and also in production. So that's why we'll be using Travis to run our tests. I will also be using coveralls, and all of these, you just have to create an account with them and maybe link your GitHub to these different platforms, and you're able to access their services free of charge. I know there are people who use other alternatives to these. Yes, it's still fine. However, just get to know what steps are required, and then you'll be able to follow through on the different tools that you use, because ideally it's the same thing. And the difference between these tools is that they're provided by different companies. So of course, there's a slight difference here and there. However, that shouldn't be a worry. Yes, so this is basically what we shall be looking at today. I'm going to give you a brief on the test environment, and then we'll talk about the projects to be used. Of course, we have to use a project in order to perform tests. We cannot perform tests on a project that does not exist. We'll be looking at unit testing, and then we'll also look at integration testing. Then I'll give a hint, if time allows, that is, on REST API testing, which will come in very handy when we're looking at Postman tomorrow. So Postman is a tool for testing, like we mentioned yesterday, and we'll be looking at it specifically. Then we'll also have a look at coveralls, which I've already mentioned for code coverage. So code coverage is basically test code coverage, or how much of your code has been tested. Is it 10% of the code? Is it 30%, 75%? So if the tests fail, then you're not going to be able to push your project into production. You want to push your code into production. So that is why we need these different tools. Yes, so just as a reminder from where we left off yesterday, we're going to be using Visual Studio for as basically our text editor. And as many of you know, there's a lot of options on text editors out there. You can use what is comfortable for you, but I use Visual Studio because, one, I'm comfortable with it, and also it is easy to use. Then lastly, a lot of software developers use Visual Studio Code as a text editor. Yes, so if you have that, I hope you all have that installed. I see in the chat that a lot of you have installed everything. Yes, I can see Granga installed everything. So yeah, you're good to go, Granga. Thank you for installing that. Ronnie is left with Postman, which is fine. If you don't have Postman, it's okay. We're going to be using it tomorrow. And as you can see, it is not on our list today. Oh, it is actually, but it's not supposed to be because we're not going to be using Postman today. We'll use it later on tomorrow. So for today, we have to make sure that we have Python installed. And the link is already available on yesterday's presentation, which was shared with all of you. So if you haven't seen it yet, please check your email. You'll be able to receive yesterday's presentation and you can easily access these links. Alternatively, you could just Google Python and then you go to our official Python website and you're able to install the latest version of Python that can run on your machine. Yeah, then we need Git, which will be help us to run our projects locally. And then we also will be using pip as our package manager. So with Git, we'll be able to perform some tests really before we can push these tests to GitHub. Yes, so once these tests have passed locally on our machine, then we're able to push the code to GitHub, and then we'll be able to test it with Travis, and then consistency with Flake 8 for the coding style. Flake 8 is really for to check the coding style, and all these are pip modules, which we shall talk about later on. I've already spoken about the operating systems, and it doesn't really matter. Postman is not relevant at the moment, and we'll be using Django framework for today. And then lastly, Git is repeated. So I'll move on to the next slide. So I'll be giving a crash course on Django framework in a bit. So this actually is the general structure of our tests. But before we go into that, I'll be giving you a crash course on Django. So to those that do not know what Django is, or those that have heard about it but haven't really used it, Django is a framework, Python framework. So what is a framework? If you're hearing that for the first time, a framework basically helps you to set up the usual things about projects in a standardized manner. So there's a way files are organized as compared to when you have to write Python on your own. You have to decide how the files are going to be organized and which files are going to contain what. But then you look at Django as a framework, and it uses MVC pattern or MVT pattern, right? So what is MVC? MVC basically is models, views, and controllers. And can someone tell me what the T stands for in MVT in the chat? I'll give that some 10 seconds and then we'll move on from there.
Maybe as they're replying, I think I've seen a few comments about not being able to see your screen. I don't know if everyone is seeing your screen, or maybe it's just a few. All right. Okay, I can see a comment. Someone sees a screen. Okay.
Yes, thank you so much, Paul, for checking in. And I can see that, yeah, we are already aware of what MVT is. Lawrence, John, Aditayo, yes, it stands for templates, models, view, and templates. Template is basically an HTML file. Yeah, so it's MVC and MVT is just a slight difference, but both are related. So that is what a framework actually aims to achieve, to organize your work in a certain way, right? So what you see on your screen here is the basic structure for all Python tests. And then what is in bold, these are folders. And then when you see a tab, that means the file is within that folder. So the bolded texts are basically folders, and the blank or plain texts are basically files, which we're going to look at. So that's why you can see that we have maybe .cfg, we have .py, and we have different other files, but then the ones in bold do not have extensions. Yes, so but before we dive into that, I just want to talk about Django briefly. So it's a web development framework that assists in building and maintaining quality web applications. So why quality for framework is because there are standards in which you're supposed to write your code in a more efficient way. So when you use a framework, you actually much better than someone who writes Python from scratch. But also this varies from one situation to another. That is what Django is. So it helps to eliminate repetition. You don't have to reinvent the wheel, and you do not have to repeat code that you have already written. Yeah, so people who use Laravel, for example, are able to know that you have to include files everywhere, hashtag, include different components on different files. So that is that is plain PHP, not Laravel. So Laravel is also a framework in PHP. So that is what frameworks aim to eliminate. And that is what Django is. So we're going to be running tests on the Django module. So yes, that is an overview of Django, and we said it uses an MVC pattern, which is basically the models, views, and controllers. If you're surprised by those terms, I'm going to explain them in a bit. Then the MVT is slightly different from MVC. So in Django, it takes care of the controller bit of things. So you do not have to worry about the controller, and that's why it's T. So controller is basically code that controls the interactions between the model and the view, right? So what is left then is the template, which I mentioned earlier on is an HTML file mixed with the DTL. DTL is Django template language. Yeah, so that is what MVT is. So the developer provides the model, the view, and the templates. Then you map it to a URL. So URLs, basically, if you look at many of the sites that we use, it's going to have /login or /careers or whatever URLs you have, be able to generate them. And then you're able to provide them also to the end user. So that is what the MVT actually is. So the DTL is Django template language, well, and together with HTML make up for the template. Then, I hope you all installed Python. If you haven't installed Python, then it's pretty straightforward to install Python, because Django, as mentioned earlier, is a Python framework. So we need to have Python installed. If you're using Linux or Mac OS, then you already have Python installed. You can just go to the terminal and then type Python, press enter, and then you're able to see how this happens. So I'll give you 10 seconds to just check in the terminal and check if Python is installed. If you're using Windows, you can also check how Python, if Python is installed on your computer. The command is quite simple. Just type Python in the terminal, press enter, and then if you receive an error message, it means you haven't installed Python. If you do not, or it also means that you haven't linked it properly. There could be issues with your installation. Yeah, so After installing Python, then we have to install Django. You have to install Django. So it's quite straightforward as well. So you just simply type Django. Django is like the movie Django Unchained, for those that watched it. That's the spelling of the framework Django. So you can simply type that in Google and you're able to receive the Django, download it and install it. All right, so I'm going to present my screen now and show you a couple of things. I think we've had enough theory for now, and we'd like to go for a practical session. But for now, if you have any questions, I'd like to take them on before we can transition to the next phase. Pal, over to you now.
The questions here, someone was saying, Bronlin says, I'm having trouble downloading pip and Django, or is it included in Python? I think you've basically answered. Maybe you can answer with regard to pip.
Yes, if you have trouble installing pip, do not worry. I'm going to be able to show you all of this. So for now, do not worry about that. We'll look at it later. Just in the interest of time, because there's quite a lot to cover and there's a lot of explanation to do. So please just follow in the session, and then maybe if time allows, I will be able to cover how to do these installations. The project already is on my GitHub, and I'm going to share the link with you as well, such that you're able to clone it.
Yes, I think that might answer the next question. Arthur says, could you be having a script file that we can run to install the tools like PyTest and pip?
Yes, there are very many commands to install pip and Python and Django. You can run this on command line, or you can install it directly from the individual websites of these tools, Python, Django, pip. So yeah, and all the installation instructions are there for the different versions. You're able to find documentation for all of these files. So do not worry about that. For now, just follow through, and then you'll be able to see all of these things. Thank you.
Then Alan says, can you share the requirement .txt with all the required modules for installation?
Yes, definitely. I'm able to do this. I'll share that with you, but that was already shared as well with yesterday's PDF. So I'm guessing that you missed yesterday's session, but if you haven't received it, you will be able to receive it. So yeah, what you see on my screen here is Travis. So I was just running a few things, but for now I want us to go into Python basically. Just give me a second to set things up.
Yeah, maybe I can should I keep going with the questions, or?
Yes, at this moment we can take on more questions.
Yes, someone is asking, would there testing, I think, would there be testing with Java and boot and Spring Boot as well?
No, we shall not be having tests for all other languages. For this particular session, we're going to be using Django framework, which is built on Python.
Okay, yeah, I think that is all. Charles, let me share with you. Oh, also someone asks PIP3 or PIP2, which one should I download?
Good question. We're going to be using PIP3 instead. Yes, you'll be able to. I see someone has asked if you're going to be having this video. Yes, you'll be having it, such that you can go through it at a later time in case you missed anything. And for those that are joining late, someone says they came in 12 minutes late. Please do not worry. Adeze, you'll be able to receive, first of all, the presentation, but today we do not have much to present in terms of slides. We have more of action, which is hands-on. So please follow in. And if you have any questions, I'm watching the chat, so I'll be able to respond. Maybe not immediately, but when I look at the questions, I will be able to respond. Thank you so much. Please keep them coming in.
And see another question here from Brian. He says, I use Vim quite comfortably. Do I still need VS Code?
VS Code is just a text editor, so you can use any that you're comfortable with. But for this session, we're going to be using Visual Studio Code. So just for purposes of uniformity, maybe you could install it, but it still does not matter what you use, what text editor you use, provided it gets the work done. So if you're looking at your screen right now, we're getting started. I was just setting myself up to give you the basics in terms of explanation. So there's quite a lot of files. If you can look at the dashboard right here. So I'm not going to go through each and every file that you see here, but I'll go through the important ones only, which were in the previous slide. So we'll start with the ones for Django in general that we need. So of course, if you look down here, you're going to be seeing the settings file and files in Django, Python have the extension .py for those that haven't used Python. And so as you can see here, this is a settings file. You can see the templates that we have. You're able to look at the middleware, and most importantly, you're able to look at the installed apps, and then users and tests, the applications we're going to be looking at today. And tests is basically the tests that we're going to be running, the tests that we have written for the users module. Then we also look here, we have the Django REST framework, which basically is for running the REST APIs in Django. So it's for Django specifically. and those that have used Django know about it. Then Django comes with a database already installed, that is SQLite. But I'm not limiting you to use SQLite. If you're comfortable with any other alternative SQL databases out there, then you're able to work with Django much easily. So if you're using MySQL, that is fine. PostgreSQL, that is okay, and any other database really. But this is a default that comes with it, and I wanted to leave it at default, mainly because we have a lot of our colleagues that are not Python developers, and I already have this project on my GitHub. I'm going to share the link shortly, such that you're able to follow through. Yeah, so that's why I decided to keep SQLite. It's not my favorite, database, but I'll be using it for this session as well. Then we have the urls.py. Please note, it's important to know about these files because when we start testing, I want us to make sure that we have understood where to find everything. And remember, this is Django framework. So the reason why I'm explaining these files is because that is how they are arranged in Django. The framework arranges them particularly in that order for purposes of having the best of quality of products that we build. So please, if you have any questions or if you need clarity on any file, please let me know. Or if you want to relate it to something else, if you're using Laravel or any other framework that's outside Python, or if it is in Python still, a different Python framework, feel free to ask. I'll be able to relate the files. But basically for Python frameworks, the files are the same. Yes, so the urls.py, we talked about applications having URLs. So you're able to see here that we have the routes. So basically, it's a path. I'll be able to show you what this means if you already do not know when we are running the application. Yes, so we also have the wsgi.py if you're going to run your application on WSGI. WSGI basically is the web server gateway interface. So basically, we're calling web servers, for requests to web applications, but basically in Python, yeah. So do not mind about that. I hope we're not yet confused at this point. As I move into, so we already added our two apps in settings.py. We've looked at our URLs. We all know what URLs are, what you type on the browser, right, to bring your page in simple terms. So yeah, that basically is it. Then we have the models.py where we have the models. A model basically is a class that communicates mainly to the database. So that is in a nutshell what a model is. You don't have to worry about the details, but we're going to be using models. Then the API file, as the name suggests, is API. Remember we said that an API in simple terms is a user interface of one system to another system. So how does one system communicate to another? It's not like the user interface we have currently where you can see my screen and all, but basically just imagine one application has to communicate to another. So that is how, that's what an API is. And under here, you can see what we call serialization. And then you can see that we have a link up here. Like I said earlier, these files are interlinked. So we have a link at the top here, and you can see that we're importing models we're importing user from models. So already this is one of the links. So we looked at the models file down here, and then now we're seeing it in API. We're also seeing the REST framework, which we looked at earlier, and we're importing view sets from it and different other things we'll look at later on. Yeah, so basically that is those are the main files we need to look at in Django. So the different methods of submission for the REST APIs, which we shall look at, especially tomorrow, but you already know this, get, put, post, patch, and many other details we'll look at tomorrow. So mainly those are the files. So we are going to also be looking at the files we need for testing. If you have any questions at the moment, please feel free to ask them.
Yes, there are questions. Ronnie asks, do we clone this app from GitHub or do we get it? I'm a bit confused. Ronnie's hand is up. Maybe you can say something.
Yeah, I'm asking how do we get this Django project?
Yes, Ronnie, good question. So in GitHub, you can either clone it or fork it, basically interrelated. So I'm going to share the link to this project, which is on my GitHub at the moment. I hope that works for you, Ronnie. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, then Fahad says, explain more about REST API.
Yeah, so I don't want to dive into REST API at the moment because I'm going to be looking at the unit testing, and then we're going to be looking at integration testing. Then tomorrow we are going to focus more on REST API and REST API testing. So I'll be able to answer that question fully for tomorrow's session. Please stay tuned when I'll be simplifying REST APIs and REST API testing.
Yes, then thank you. Then Ben is asking, is this app default on creating a new project?
Sorry, is someone asking for the command to create a new project in Django?
Yes, I think so.
Okay, I'm going to do it from scratch, but if you can see my screen, then you're able to see the command. I'm going to type it in a bit, but then I'm going to delete it later, so I'll share it in the chat such that you're able to see the command. It's quite straightforward. Let me just open my terminal.
Maybe I can read another question. Oni says, I'm very new to these terms. Please, can you recommend sites where I can learn about them so I can pick from scratch?
Yes, do not worry about that. I'll be sharing links where you can get to learn about these terms. For now, just try to understand them, not to a high level. Remember, our focus is not on how to code in Django or Python, but our focus is on how to run tests. So an example, someone asked for a command to run Django. Yes, something I was coming to now because we're now getting started with a project. So remember, we're not creating any new project. We're simply going to test the user module in Django. So the command to testing in to run or starting a Django project is highlighted here on my terminal. I think you're able to see it. So you can see the command clearly. Python 3 is what I have. If you have a different version, then you might change your command. -m Django, then start project. So these are standard, right? As a standard command. Then my test or name of the project is the choice, the name of the project you want to create, the name of the Django project you want to create. So you just press enter, and then it's able to run. And you can see that the project has been created. So we can even open it. Yeah, so the project we created is called name of project. You can see that it comes with the same standard files, right? It comes with the same standard files. So we can see the settings still here. We can see URLs. We can see the WSGI, and then we can still see the manage.py files. So basically, these are already created for you in Python. And that's the beauty of a framework. So to run the application, to run an application, does someone remember where we keep our, which folder or which file we call applications? So what I'm doing here is I'm just changing directory, basically, to go into the project we've just created, which I called name of project for simplicity. So now you want to start the application for the users, as you can see. So the command still is Python 3-m Django start app, and then the name of the app, which is users. So you're able to see that the app has is right here, and the folders are still the same, just like the one we had initially. So you can see that we still have the admin.py, we have the apps, we have the models, the tests and views. Views just contains our views, really, as the name suggests. Yes, so that is the command to run the application. So the next command you have seen here is to create migrations for the database. So the command, let me just share them in the chat for purposes of simplicity. Just give me a second. Share with everyone. So I've shared with you in the chat the command to run a Django project. So if you have Python installed and you have Django installed, so you can already see that these are interrelated. So if one is missing, we're going to be facing challenges, right? So that first command is to create a new Django project.
Yes.
Yes, Paul.
Sorry to cut you short. I'm seeing quite a number of comments with people who are unable to install Django. So maybe you could hint on that.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to hint on that in a bit. Right. However, you can still do this after, because currently we have used about 50 minutes, and then installing may take a lot of time, because I saw some people do not have pip installed. But the command basically is on the screen. If you have pip installed, then let me just share this with you. Yes, the command in the chat is to install Django from command line. You can install, you can just type Django on your browser, and then you go to the Django official website where you're able to download Django. So yeah, what we're doing right now is installing Django, but I already have it installed. So yeah, it takes about less than 5 minutes to install on command line. It's already done. Yeah, so I was still sharing the commands. So the next command is to start the user's application. I hope you remember where the applications are, but if you don't have to worry about it. So that command is to start the application. And then for database migrations, this is a command, Python 3 manage.py, and then make migrations. Oh, I missed the S, so just add it. Okay, those are the commands we have used so far. I will be sharing more of these as we move on and explaining what each of these commands does. Yeah, so the next command is to run the migrations after creating them. So I'll just share that in the chat. Yeah, and this particular command is able to create the databases. So we can already see different things that have come up. We have the user's last login, username, email, last name, group name, max length, proxy permissions, max length, and then sessions. So all of this has already been done for you ideally. If you're running a project from scratch, you have to do all of this yourself. And we all know that as developers, you have usually tight deadlines to beat. So if you're going to reinvent the wheel, then you might lose a lot of time, and what you do may not even be the best. Yeah, so that is it so far. So I'll be deleting the project. I just wanted to show you how to run a Django project. So I think we have seen how to create one, the structure of really on a high level. So I've not gone through every file, but I've gone through the important files that we shall be needing for this session. So do not worry if you've forgotten. I'll still remind you as we move on. So allow me to delete the project such that we can run the one I had already created for this session. Hopefully this was okay for you. So we have another file called the requirements .ini file. So this is basically where you put requirements for your project, such as the Python modules like pip. So these requirements are for both production, and then you can see all these requirements that we need for this project. So we need Django, of course, it's our framework that we're using. And remember, framework is simply something that highlights how a project should be arranged. Basically, it prevents you from repetition and reinventing the wheel. Django REST framework, basically, someone already talked about REST APIs, which we're going to look at later on today or tomorrow. We still have a lot of time. And the rest of the things, PyTests, which is Python's testing module. Someone was talking about Java. So when you come to Java, you look at things such as JUnit, which is used for testing in Java. Then I also spoke about cover rules, which is used for code coverage, so it shows you what percentage of code has been tested. And then, yeah, basically, there's so much, but those are the highlights. Yeah, then yes, so that was it about Django. So the crash course to Django has ended. I know some of you might still be having a lot of questions to ask, but I'm unable to answer them at the moment because we're losing a lot of time trying to work on Django. So I'd like to dive and focus more on why we are here, and why we're here is simply testing. We also have QA people who are not exactly developers, but they're better at testing. So they really want to focus on testing. So they want to specialize, that's what they specialize in. So we'll focus on testing. I'll be talking about the general structure of tests that we looked at on the PowerPoint, but do not worry, I'm not going to present the PowerPoint, but instead I will be talking about the files live as you can see them, such that when you clone or fork this project from GitHub, you basically understand where to find them. I think this is much better than the slides where it's more theory. So at least here you can see where the files are. So we start with the pytest.ini file, which I call ini in my own terms, but you don't have to call it that. You can also call it your own way. So basically, it's a configuration file for Python, and yeah, it can be configured to ignore deprecated functions or functions which are outdated. So many times we get warnings when you run your product or your application. You can find sometimes even 300 warnings, maybe 250 of them and all. So yeah, to ignore all these warnings, this is where you come to ignore them. So basically, it's a configuration file used by PyTest, which is a testing module for Python. So basically that is it. And then we have setup.cfg. Yes, so setup.cfg file basically is a FLEC 8 configuration file, which is used for the coding style. So different organizations have their coding styles. So some could use spaces, others could use tabs, others could have maximum complexity. Others could use tabs. Of course, you can use tabs instead of space. So where the code finds where the compiler finds a space, it will replace it with a tab, for example. You can also choose to ignore certain files. So I've left some comments here, which you're able to see. It's basically what I'm trying to explain to you in a nutshell. Yeah, so you can ignore or exclude certain files, such as .git files, .vnv files, and the .cache files. So what happens then is that once you set up to exclude, as you can see right here, yeah, as you can see right here, is exclude. So I'm trying to tell the compiler that once you find .git, .tox, .vanv files, or files that are for tests and all, you ignore them, right? So it means it will not run them when it's compiling. So if the errors, you'll survive for the moment. Yes, and so this file is also used by text editors to highlight anything that does not align with the company's coding style, as mentioned prior. And then it uses FLEC 8, right? The setup.cfg file uses FLEC 8, which is a code style guideline environment tool for Python. So we've had a highlight of what the setup.cfg file is. And you can see that we have the max line length is 120. So you can set up this to be different for you. You can change it to whatever you want. That is fine. So basically, to do all of those, you can do them from the setup.cfg file. And all of these fall under your project, the main folder of your project.
Daniel, we have quite a number of requests for you to share your GitHub repo link such that they can be able to access it while you're demoing.
Okay, just give me 1 minute. Let me get the link.
Maybe I can go through some other questions. Would that be okay, Daniel, as you find the link?
I know I already have the link, so we'll look
Okay.
at the questions in a bit. So let me just drop it in the chat. Please let me know if you received it. I've just dropped it in the chat, so you're able to follow through. Although my GitHub is already configured with Travis and coveralls, so you may not be able to find other things. I also have Circleci already installed, so you may not be able to access this, at least for now, until I show you how to do it. So it may not run exactly as it should, but please notice that those are for continuous integration and code coverage, respectively. So the project should run just fine. Thank you. I hope you're able to access it. If there's any challenges, you can let Paul and I know, and then we'll be able to resolve them. So all of you are able to access it. Once you reach GitHub, then all you have to do is to, when you reach the project, on the top right hand, you're able to see the option to fork the project. So you simply, once you click fork the project, then you're able to choose the repository name. It's already chosen for you, but you can select, because I have other things as well. Then you can be able to clone this project. Yeah, hopefully that helps. If there are any challenges, I can also let you know. Okay, so we're still looking at the files that are important for testing. And we have just looked at the setup. So if you look up here on the tab, I'm leaving them open such that we can review them in due time. So we've looked at most of these. So in case you have any questions, feel free to ask. I'll be able to move back a bit just to bring us all up to speed. So the next file I would want for us to look at is that talks.ini file or talks.ini file. You can call it whatever you want. These names are not standard. Yeah, so the purpose for this file basically is that it's a plugin config file used to simplify the setup of Travis. Can someone tell me in the chat, maybe within 5 to 10 seconds, what Travis is for? Then I can be able to move to the next point. Okay, yes, Travis is for continuous integration. So basically, I mentioned that you simply come to your browser, look for Travis CI. CI stands for continuous integration, which in basic terms is to build, to deploy, and to test, right? So that is what Travis, that's what continuous integration is. So basically you're able to build and test software projects that are hosted on GitHub or on Bitbucket. So that is basically what Travis is. And so now we're going to be looking at Travis for now, just briefly. So you're able to also see, I'll drop the link in the chat as well. Yes, Okello, it's a CI/CD tool. Maybe you have introduced a new term, CD. Maybe you could also tell us what CD is. Arthur asks an interesting question. Are there other steps for the tools required as we walk through listed in the presentation template? Yeah, so Travis comes in when you now you have deployed on GitHub. So for now, we have looked at the Django setup. Fahad says CD is change directory. Joseph says CD is continuous deployment. Yeah, I think the CD we mean in this case is continuous deployment. Yeah, and then Okello says continuous development, which is basically correct as well. So continuous deployment or development. So this is how Travis looks like, and I'll be showing you later on how to use it. But for now, let us finish the files for testing. So far we have looked at 3 files: the pytest.ini file, which is a test configuration file. I've looked at the setup file, which uses FLEC8 for code style, and we've looked at the talks file, which is a plugin config file, which is used to simplify the setup of your work for Travis, the setup of Travis basically for your code. Then we'll go into the tests file, which has quite a number of things. As you can see up here, this is the test files. So the most important things here are we have the fixtures.py, right? So this allows you to pass parameters to your test files globally. So if you want to, I think we all know what parameters are from the basics of programming. You want to pass certain parameters, maybe to your test files, right? So such as login, you can see you want to pass maybe a user. You can pass certain data about the user, maybe login credentials. You can pass such data, right? Also, when we look at APIs later on, we shall be able to see what data to test. JSON, basically, that's to do with the APIs, which we shall look at. But for now, let us look at testing the user, the Django user module. So we've looked at the fixtures.py, and all this fall under the unit folder, which is basically a folder in the tests, under the tests folder, which is up here. And so under tests, we have 2 kinds of tests that we're looking at already. We have the integration folder where we have our integration test file, and then we have the unit folder, which basically from yesterday, I hope we still remember what unit testing is and what integration testing is. So now we're looking at it more practically. We have the test. So basically, so we also have the factories file. So any.py is a Python file, and that's why it's colored in my text editor. So the factories is where you create your mockup data. So where your mockup is generated. The reason why you see, so what is mockup? Sorry, I'd forgotten to explain that. Mockup data basically is data that could be you emulating basically data that would be used in real time by an actual user. So why you create mockup data is because at this point, when you're developing, you do not have actual users yet. So you want to see if the users, for example, have an example of mockup data can be a username and password, email, such data. But if you're also going to, you can have mockup data also for real applications, not just login. So if you, let's say, for example, you're creating a calculator, you can have mockup data to just test how the functions of calculators work. I'm not going to the complexities of that application. So yeah, basically to create mockup data for your application. If your application is going to take in emails, then you can create such data. If you're going to, you can even create users, give them details, credentials, and you're able to test if these users are able to log in. So as you can see on your screen here, I'm able to create a username, give a username, and I'm also able to create for this user an email and assign them an email, as you can see here. And then I'm also able to give them a password. So basically that is for the user module under the class user factory. So in summary, this class basically is for creating mockup data. So this is the data we're going to be using to test. Yeah, and we shall also be able to test this data under the integration tests right here. So we shall see how it works. But for now, we just need to see what each file is for when we're testing. So if you have noticed that there's something unique about our test files, they have the name tests and underscore. And the reason why they have this name is such that the PyTest, which is a testing module for Python again, is going to look for files that start with the test and underscore, and then whatever comes after the underscore is the name of your file. So you can call it maybe utils or any other name. So when the PyTest finds these files, it considers them as test files and is able to run them. If you choose a different name that does not start with that test underscore, then you're able to, the files are going to be treated as ordinary files, not test files. So test files are different from the other ordinary files. And remember that the test structure for Python projects is the same for Django, Flask, or any other Python framework. So do not worry about that. Yes, Prince, thank you for the highlight. I see you're paying a lot of attention to details. Yeah, let's just keep moving forward. That's an encouragement for me that you're still with us. So what we have now are the util tests that we're going to be using to test our user. It's a lot of code here, but don't worry about it. Yeah, so basically we have to test whether or not the path is an absolute URL. How do we do that? We're going to check if it starts, of course, with HTTP. Martin, don't worry, this will be shared on on our YouTube, so you'll be able to follow once again. And so for anyone who's lost, please do not worry. I know it can be overwhelming. However, just focus on the testing. Then we're able to validate the URLs as well in the test.util. Yeah, so basically that is what we are going to run now. So we have looked at the functions, and now we're going to the tests, right? So utils has the functions. Now we're looking at the tests where we're going to run these particular tests. So I'm going to explain what is contained in this file. So remember that test files begin with test underscore and then the name of the test. So the file we're testing is utils. I decided to call mine test underscore utils. So such that once again, when PyTest is running, it will be able to detect and understand that, oh, this is a test file, so I need to run it. That is why we use this kind of nomenclature for these files. Yeah, so these are the tests that we're going to run for the functions we've seen previously. And then right here is where we basically, this is what we call assertions. So basically, an assertion is something that's either true or false. You can look at it as a Boolean, but the difference is that I will basically just checking for certain things. So the previous we were looking to check if there's an absolute URL. Well, we said, does it start with HTTPS? So this is an assertion. If it is an absolute, so you can see the difference. We have HTTP and HTTPS, right? So we can also assert that this is not an absolute URL. So example here, you can see that this does not start with HTTP nor HTTPS. Yeah, so this is basically a test function to test for absolute URL. So we also have test cases here, and we have a test here to check for these different URLs. So we're trying to validate if it's a bad destination address, right? So that's basically what it does for this. I see a lot of you are lost in the chat. Again, do not mind about the Python. The emphasis here is on the testing. So if you're doing this in PHP, with PHP units, that's fine. If you're doing it with JUnit, that's fine. Basically, it's the same thing. Advantages for Python people, unfortunately, or fortunately. So do not mind about the syntax, really. Just follow through on which file is important, what is being done. So in a nutshell, what we're doing here is we have run, we started by running a Python project. Remember, you're not going to even write any piece of code because I've already done this for you. So you can just go to my GitHub and you're able to clone or fork this project and able to run it on your machine. But the one on my GitHub is already well tested. So I would advise that maybe you just run your own. So basically run the code, know which file is important, how to run it. I've already shared the links in the chat, so that should be helpful. So you just copy paste and then you'll be able to get there. So what you see on my screen right now is my terminal. I hope you can all see it clearly. So I'm going to be running the project such that we're able to see it. So what you see on your screen is a command to run the different tests. So I'm going to explain. So we've seen the tests, how they're written. Marvin, I can see you're lost, don't worry. I'm going to show you how that looks like in the test environment, how the test runs, what percentage, which tests have passed, which ones have failed, and then we'll be able to see how to debug them. So just give me a second as I try to run the project. Yeah, so I got an error. Let me check if I'm in the right directory. So the test is going to show us which test files have run and which ones have failed. Yeah, so I was in the wrong directory. That is why it was giving us a difficult time. But now we can see that our different tests have run. Remember our folder we had the file, our project, our test is under our test folder is tests. And then we have the different files. We have the integration folder where we have our integration tests. And then in the integration folder, we have a file called test users, where we have different functions in the test file that are being run, as you can see, with the percentages portrayed on the side. So all of these tests have passed. Initially, some of them failed because I skipped some things, but of course I had the time to correct them. So don't worry if yours fail, we can always be able to debug them. So we shall look at the integration tests later. For now, we are looking at the tests.utils file, remember, the one that was under unit folder, the unit folder. So all these tests are under the unit folder, which includes our unit tests. And remember, unit testing is testing for the smallest modules or the small units. Then later on, we integrate these units to make sure that the entire system is functioning. Yeah, so we have still under the folder tests, we have the unit folder under the tests folder, and then we have our utils. Utils.py contains the function that we're testing. So here we had the function to validate if it's a bad destination, right? Then we can see that that kind of test has passed, and this is what we had. So here you need to pay some bit of attention. I just want to show it to you in the code as well. This is in a terminal. I want to show you in the code as well to see how this actually was. So yeah, you can see that these are the URLs that we're testing for. And then we're going to see all of them and whether they passed or not. So what I'm doing here basically is to show you, I'm trying to reverse the test now. So because all of these have passed, I want to show you that we can also code it to fail. So we had an assertion here that this is an absolute URL. It's the one that starts with HTTP, and then we say that the one that starts with HTTPS is also absolute, but the one that does not start with HTTPS is not absolute. So it will raise an error. So I want to do the reverse of this. Remember, we have positive and negative tests. So I'm now going to change it and say this is not an absolute URL, and then we're going to see the difference. I'll only change one. I'll leave the HTTPS such that you can see that some will pass and some will fail. And that's what testing is really. So just give me a second to rerun the command. Yes, we can see our tests are running. And now we can see that URLs that start with HTTP have failed. So we have caught one URL that is not absolute, right? So we said, that's because I said not. So if I say not to the next, when I say not for HTTPS, you're going to see that they're also going to fail. So basically what this means is you determine, remember, the developer is supposed to determine the tests and the test cases. So right now we're testing URLs. So I'm running the test again. I've changed it now for HTTPS and I've reverted. So in our next test, we should have this to pass and the rest to fail. So if you're wondering what we're doing here, we're just simply testing for URLs that are absolute and those that are not absolute. So we're able to see where Assad is not true. So basically we're checking if a URL is absolute or not. And an absolute one is one that starts with HTTP or HTTPS, and then one that doesn't is not absolute. So that's what we're testing here. And we see an assertion error here that assert not true. So it has said HTTPS is not true. So this is an error. It means your test has failed and there's something you need to do about it. Yeah, basically that error has been caught. Yeah, so basically that is an example of unit testing where we're testing URLs.
Daniel, I'd like to interject with, I think we have a raised hand and a question. Ronnie was asking which command you used to carry out the test.
Good question, Ronnie. The command is basically when you go to the README file, these commands are actually available to you. So do not worry about that. If you can see my screen, I'm on the README file here. So I put all the commands for you to run. Yeah, so I'll also be editing them for more, maybe for easy usage. But if you want to run the tests, then it's the last command right here. So we've used all the other commands and we're left with this last test. The last command rather to run the tests. So it's able to provide the coverage as well. We've been able to see that in percentage format. I hope we're still together at this point. Yes, Juma, you're welcome. Please let me know if that runs for you. If you're facing any challenge, I could be able to help you live if time allows. So in the interest of time, I'd like to then run into the integration testing. Yes, Paul, you had a question?
Yes.
Hello.
Yes, Alfonso.
Yes. Good afternoon. Good evening. I'm so sorry. I was having network issues. I was logged on earlier when we started, and I went off for about 30 minutes. So I log in about 10 minutes again. So I was asking a question in the Q&A, and I can see a API.py. So it's looking like a Python app to me here. So I was asking the question and answer forum that are you using the Python app or the Postman for the unit testing? I'm actually lost. Please just do a quick recap so that I can meet up, please. Thank you.
Yes, we are doing unit testing. We're not using Postman at the moment. Postman will be for tomorrow. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, so what are we using at this time?
So currently we have written our test cases, right?
Okay.
So we're simply running them locally on the commands that I shared on the README file. So I'm going to show you basically how the report looks like. Yeah, okay. So if you can check the screen, this is an HTML generated report. So it will show you basically which tests passed, the time that was taken, the duration basically for these tests, and also links where necessary. So it will also show you the number of tests that have passed, those that have failed, errors, expected failures, and unexpected passes. Yeah. So this is basically an overview of what we have done at the moment. Yeah, so that is it. I would like to, in the interest of time, run into integration testing, and then we're able to push to GitHub, and then we're able to also run Travis, or Circleci, and coveralls to see how this is done in GitHub. Remember, it could run properly locally as we've done it now, and all tests are passing. But when you go into a production environment, then you could face different challenges. And then Travis is able to do a build, and also do its own, basically the same thing, but when your code is on GitHub. Because remember, many times you use GitHub basically with to make you to push your code to GitHub when you're working with other people. So they're also able to access it from there, just like you're able to access this file from my GitHub. So I'll be looking at integration tests for now. Remember, we have the integration under the tests folder. We have a folder called integration, which contains the integration tests for now. And under integration tests, we're going to be looking at the Django user modules, basically the username, the password, the emails. When all of these have been put together, before we were testing only the URLs, and now we want to test the Django user module, basically. So that's what we're looking at. And the folder we have here is test_users. As a quick reminder, why we call them tests is for the PyTest to realize that this is a test file. So it will not ignore it. It will ignore the other files that do not start with test. So that is why this is mandatory. Test_ is mandatory, and then you can put the username that you want. In most cases, you can use a star or the asterisk. So now we are going to test our functions for that Django user module. All of this come with Django. We're going to test create the create user module, and then we're going to check whether the user names or credentials are valid. If you can see certain status codes, we have 400, we have 405, and we have 200. If you've done tests before, or if you know about testing, then you're able to know that these are error codes and you know what they're for. So maybe I can get some suggestions in the chat as we look into the integration testing. I'll give it a bit, some 10 seconds, and then we'll dive into the integration testing. Okay, I can see someone says 200 is okay or success. Yeah, that is definitely the status code for if your test is successful, that is what will be presented. But worry not, I'll be showing you this in a while. So we're writing functions here that are tests which run automatically, and then tomorrow we shall be testing with Postman manually, right? So stay tuned. I know some of you are confused because we're using Python. Even if we used Java, even if we used PHP, we still have people that are not following because you do not use these languages. It's not a sin. However, you just have to know the basics of testing. What is testing and how does testing occur? So right now we're doing integration testing of the API. So remember that the factories.py file is where we create mockup data. So the function you see up there, f.user factory.create. Basically, we're creating a user. I'm trying to put comments such that you can easily follow. Yeah, then we also have the response. So basically, we have a request and then we have a response. So the response is basically a response to our request. So we're picking users from the API. So we're picking users from the API that has already been created. And then if the user does not exist, you'll get the error 405. Someone already said 200 is okay or success. But if we are unsuccessful, what error do we get? I think we've also seen error 404 somewhere, which means not found. So all these are standards, then you cannot choose your error code. These are standard error codes. So you can simply do some research on error codes, but I'll be sharing more tomorrow. Yes, there's a question from Joseph. We're doing testing of API. He asks if that statement was really necessary. So basically, an API is basically an interface, right, between two systems. But now we have, and you see that when two units are communicating, it's sort of an API, right? So that's basically what we're doing. But we'll look at what an actual API is tomorrow. So yeah, now I'm going to be able to run. So yes, Joseph, I think I've answered your question, but to be clear, Here we have written tests, right? So we already have our test files that we're just going to run. I've not gone into details of how to write these tests because, of course, the syntax challenge comes into play. Many of us use different languages. So I want us to basically just focus on on testing as opposed to syntax. But of course, we have to test something. So I'm using Django and Python for now. And I'll put as much comments as I can and commit them to GitHub for you to be able to access them. So yeah, that's basically what we're testing. And then we'll be able to also do testing on Postman tomorrow. I hope that answers your question. So we've already run the tests here. We've seen that they have passed, but I hadn't explained the integration tests. So let's just give this a second to run. Yeah, I hope you can all see. So we have that module here. The test is complete. All tests have now passed. So we had our test users file under the integration folder, which is under the tests folder. So we're testing to see whether the user was created. Remember, we had a function to create a user. So was a user created through a standard API? Yes, that passed. And then we also had tests to sanitize the user. Basically, is the user valid or invalid? So we're testing for the full name. And then we can see that all of those tests passed. So we've created a user and we're able to verify and validate the user's details. So once you have run your tests locally, the next step is to then, and if they're successful, that is, if there's still issues, then you have to do what we call debugging. Yeah, so for now, what we're going to do is to push to GitHub. I'm going to be sharing the commands with you. So we run the git init file to initialize git. So it's just git init. Then the next command you see, let me just share them in the chat a bit such that we're all able to follow. And these are git commands that cut across all. So it's not these are not language specific. So at least you should be familiar with them. Where is my chat? All right, here. And then we have, please don't include the hashtag. I added that by mistake. So we also have git add and the full stop. So the purpose of the full stop is basically to include all files of your project, right? So you can add files one by one, but that is really hectic. I think we've seen that we have so many files. So the git.add basically adds every file of your project for you. So I think that's much easier to use. And then we're able to commit this code to GitHub. So we first commit this to our Git locally by running that command git commit -m, and then in the quotations you can run you can write any name you want, such as my first commit or first commit, which is a default. Yeah, then the next step, the next command, let me share it in the chat. I hope you're all able to see it in the chat. This then pushes the code to GitHub. Yeah, so that's what has happened. And yeah, it has been pushed to GitHub. So we're now able to access GitHub. So yeah, that brings us to the end of testing locally. And now I'm going to shift attention to GitHub, where our project is. So I already had this opened because people were asking for the link. So this is it. It's github.com/my name, Fedra, and /my test, which is the name of our project. So under here, you're able to basically can fork the project. You can also download it if you want it locally, and then you will be able to run it as we have talked about. So now we spoke about Travis, cover roles, and Circleci. So I'm just now going to be showing you how to do that. So locally, we saw how to run our code, our tests, how to catch errors, and also to get code coverage in terms of percentage, which tests have passed, which ones have failed. The reason why you're able to see where the tests have failed is such that you're able to identify the errors in a much easier way. Definitely, you can always write your code without testing, but that is a big risk. So it's always good to invest some time to test. And most of our clients actually emphasize testing. So when you go for interviews, you'll be asked certain questions, such as unit testing, integration testing, which tools have you used? Yes, so for now, I'll be showing you Travis and Circleci. I already gave you an overview of Travis, so I will start with the Circleci. They're basically the same things. Travis is now paid for, and then Circleci is a free version for CI/CD, which is continuous integration, as we looked at earlier on. So yeah, I'm just going to show you now how to link your GitHub to Circleci first. So you basically sign up if you haven't already, but because I already signed up with, you can sign up with your email, GitHub, or Bitbucket. Remember, these platforms are interlinked, right? For CI/CD, you're going to be using Circleci or Travis alongside GitHub or Bitbucket. I'll use GitHub because a lot of people use it. And so we're able to understand it all. Yes, so once you create your Circleci, you want to sign up with them, this is the interface you'll get. So you can already see it's linked to my GitHub. If you check the profile, then you can see that it's the same image. So what we do next is to set up a new project such that we're going to be able to run these same tests now, such that you're able to see them. So the project I'm running is called My Tests. There are different other projects in the drop down here, but the one we're focusing on is My Test at the moment. So we're going to be setting up these projects, and we'll be running the main branch. So there's a blue button there, you just click it, and then the project is able to run your tests. So let's see how that works with the Circleci. So yes, it has run our tests, and we can check the build and see how that is. So automatically it's going to set up for you the environment, then also the environment variables you can see are going to be prepared. It's going to pick your username here and different other variables that are required. Then to also check out your code, install the different requirements for you, but we won't focus on those so much. What we want to focus on mainly, it will also install for you the dependencies of your project. So you may have these locally, but you may not have them when you shift. So it will install for you these dependencies, and then it will also run the tests for you, just like we did on on Git. Now we're able to see the same exact thing, but this for code that is now on GitHub. So this is how it looks like. You're able to see code coverage now. So what is code coverage? Code coverage is basically what percentage of my test file has been covered. So you can see that the utils was 92%. For the users, serializers, we have 100% for these, and then some, the WSGI file and the URLs, sorry, the report files have 0%. This simply means that no line of code has been tested in these files. So basically, it's untested code. Then we have the manage.py, which is also not tested. So 0% means 0% of 0% of your code has been tested. 100% means all of it has been tested. 92% means some bits of your code have not been tested, but majority have. So it will give you the overview and then a total or summary for that. And then you're able to run the HTML report that you wrote. So it will give you a more beautiful report than the scary command line interface. Yeah, that is what Coveralls does. The same thing happens for Travis. If you're to use Travis, you simply go to Travis. So let me just get it in a second. Yeah, so it's basically the same thing as Circleci, so I'll not be going through it so much, but I already signed up, so the same thing will happen here for the test that you try to run. Then you're able to subscribe for it. Yeah, so basically that is it, and that brings us to the end today. So time for questions. I know there should be a lot of them.
Yes, we have a few questions, though these were questions from a bit earlier. I held on to them. Someone was asking which IDE you're using in the demo. Maybe you could answer that.
Yeah, we're using Visual Studio Code for our demo.
Yes, then someone asked for the difference between a framework and a library.
So basically, when you look at a framework, as I explained earlier, it is basically, it helps you to organize your code in a particular way and in a uniform way. So if you're working with framework, it gives you a particular way of working, a particular way of organizing your files, and it also helps to prevent repetition and reinventing the wheel, basically creating the same things from scratch. So if you're going to work on from one project to another, there are certain things that you cannot do without, such as migrations and all those things that we did within a click, just by running certain commands. A library, on the other hand, basically is something that's brief and for a specific purpose, really. that run something much smaller. So you look at PyTest, for example, simply going to come in for testing. So yeah, it's just basically a testing library. So they are much smaller than the framework is really big. You're able to create projects with frameworks. Yeah, that is the difference in a nutshell. Yes, Paul, any other questions?
Yes, oh, as muted. Yes, someone is asking if they could have the step-by-step process on how to set up to the link to GitHub to Circleci and Travis CI.
Yeah, in the interest of time, I'm not able to answer that at the moment.
Yeah,
but what I can do then is to, before we start tomorrow's session, I'll be able to have organized the step-by-step for you in the README file, so you'll be able to access it. Pal, I think you're muted.
Oh, Daniel?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Yeah, someone was asking if it's a must to test both locally and with the CI.
I think it's not really mandatory because the difference is the CI helps you to always continuous integration, right? So you're able to continue building, because building does not happen exactly at once. You always continue building and testing and deploying. So that is the difference with these tools.
All right. I think that will be it for today. I've shared some links in the chat. If you still have any questions, there's a WhatsApp group that we created. Please join, and you can send in your questions. We'll be able to answer as much as we can. But you'll be receiving emails with any information that we have, and also the videos will be posted on our YouTube. If you'd like to join Tunga, I've shared the link too. Yes, thank you so much for being here today. I'd also like to remind you that we shall be giving out 2 courses for Udemy for our active participants. So please keep it going for being here, and we're excited to have you tomorrow. Thank
you, everyone. And if you have any other questions,
Daniel,
please come with them tomorrow. I'll be able to answer them. I'll be able to look at them. I know today we had so much to look at in terms of catching up with Python, other different testing files. There's so much to capture. But once again, these videos will be available for you, and you'll be able to follow step by step. I'll also share this in the README file for you. Catch you tomorrow, same time, same place. Thank you so much, Paul and IG, for coordinating this session.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, IG, and everyone. Thank you for being here.